Okay, this is Monday, the 12th of May, 2024. Okay, so nobody has joined me yet this morning. I'm just going to make a few comments about how I'm conducting the class and whether it meets your needs or not. And it meets mine, I guess, too. As you know, I am traveling in America right now, my home country, in order to conduct some business and to see my family members, my brother and sister, and my 4 children, and their spouses, and their children, my grandchildren, and now my great-grandchildren. I have 3 married grandchildren, is that right? 1, 2, yeah, I think so. And 3 married grandchildren who now all have children, or at least a child. So while I love the things I'm involved with in Kazakhstan, I also need to come and see my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren at least once a year. And so I will be here until the end of June, and then I'll be returning home to Kazakhstan. It's kind of a confusing life sometimes. What's home for me? Okay, so how many years ago? I guess about 7 years ago. Wow, been that long. I was teaching at Xiamen University Malaysia, which is a China-owned university. But taught in English and taught by international professors like myself, which is, and many of our students were children of members of the Chinese Communist Party, leaders in the Chinese Communist Party, who felt that it was to their children's benefit to get out in the real world, so to speak, outside of mainland China, and to hear the opinions of those from other countries, and to learn English so they could compete and effectively function in the rest of the world outside of China. So it was an interesting opportunity that I enjoyed. And when I first, at least early in the time I arrived there in 2017, in fact, almost exactly 7 years ago, I was just finishing up my work at Kimet University in Almaty, and so Xiamen wanted me to arrive around the 15th of May in 2017, and I had kind of negotiated my departure with the vice president of academic affairs, and we'd come to an agreement, not all of which was honored, but nonetheless, we came to an agreement, and I left a little bit early that semester to begin my services in Malaysia. And one of the first things that the university asked me to do was to create a general education course. The main people they wanted to hire were people to teach their major courses. And so for me, that would have been journalism primarily, although I also taught other courses like research and anyway, and expanded by content in different ways to include some media management course material because I thought that was lacking, and so they gave me some They gave me some courses that were a little bit generic or a little bit ill-defined, let me put it that way, undefined, perhaps, be a better word. And so I added material that I thought would be beneficial to my students that was not officially in the syllabus of those courses. But with the general education, I had already begun teaching a course almost immediately and realized that many of the students lacked adequate English skills. And so in thinking about what to teach, I wanted something they'd be interested in, but also wanted to advance their English skills. So I think I've kind of explained this before, but just quickly to review, the course topic that I created was success strategies. A lot of the content came from um, two highly successful and highly regarded award-winning authors, one being Stephen Covey, whose book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, has been published in like 40 languages and been bought by like 40 million people. I haven't been able to find the most up-to-date information on that, but that's based on old information and estimating what would have happened since the last information was revealed. That would be my best guess. And his book won many awards, um, and and he was considered one of the top business minds in the world. And his book, 7 Habits, help people to be better managers of their time, of their resources, and so forth. But it also, what he taught was very important, not just in their success as managers, which Covey, Dr. Covey himself had been very successful as an executive in a major global corporation. And in other publications of his, he talked about some of the experiences there that led him to ultimately returning to university life and deciding to get his doctoral degree. And his doctoral degree, as I understand it, was in essence writing the 7 Habits book, going back and looking at, you might call, self-improvement, self-help sort of publications over the previous 200 years, back to people like Benjamin Franklin, who wrote a lot about self-improvement as one of the founding fathers of America. He was the founder of the first library in America, as I recall. And he was an inventor and was a diplomat, was the U.S. ambassador to France and so forth. And so he was truly a leader in many different ways. And he wrote about leadership skills and so forth during his time, during the early years of America. And so that was, one of the books, some of the content that Dr. Covey looked at and concluded that the nature of such self-management and self-development books had changed from how to be a better manager because you're a better person, in a sense. Bring down the screen a little bit, to how to use techniques that will manipulate people so that you can succeed. And he did not think that was a good development. And so his book, 7 Habits, he explains, is based on what he considers basic and important principles of human interaction that most of which are mostly adopted and promoted by religions throughout the world, religions of every type, Christian, Islamic, whatever, Confucius, and that most religions recognize the importance of these principles, and he considered these primary principles, went so far, I think, to call them eternal principles. And then explained how implementing these principles of character also helped you succeed in life. So that's kind of the background of his development of the 7 habits. I was accused at one university by someone who greatly disrespects my personal religion, of teaching my religion by teaching this content, because Stephen Covey happened to be a member of the same church that I am. But although he goes out of his way in his book to kind of disclaim all religions in the sense, or to explain that he feels like the principles, as I suggested before, that he teaches are taught by all religions, and that he was not teaching any particular religion by teaching the 7 habits of highly effective people. So he went out of his way to make that point. And indeed, I don't believe there's anywhere in that book, I've gone through the book, different ways and many different times, started teaching 7 habits in 1995, when I was hired by a university to help people laid off at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation in America to find or to start a new career, because they were unlikely to ever work again in the nuclear industry, because at the end of the Cold War, we didn't want to build more atomic bombs or nuclear bombs. So that part of the nuclear industry was essentially dead. And at that point, environmentalists had pretty much killed, or at least made unprofitable, efforts in America to build nuclear energy plants. They would go to court so many times and delay stuff for years, so that it didn't make a lot of sense for companies to build nuclear plants anymore. So the whole industry was disrupted in different ways, one by the end of the Cold War and one by the opposition of environmentalists who had a lot of political influence on government officials. And so anyway, I was, so part of my job that I was hired to do was to help people consider what they had been and what they could be with the skills they had, how they might adopt some new principles and look at new opportunities. And the government, because the nuclear industry was a government-supported program, the government was offering them some funds to go back to the university or get some new training and stuff. So in our discussions and in that version of success strategies, we discussed a lot about how fortunate they were, and that the government was going to pay them to pursue their dreams. What could they imagine themselves doing outside of the nuclear industry, and how might they start their own business, or pursue whatever other dreams they might have. So I taught the 7 habits as part of that assignment over a 3-year period, and then as I began my work at KeyMap, One of the courses I was supposed to teach was PR management, advertising management, media management, those sorts of courses. And it made every sense to me to include one of the most influential books in management ever written, The Seven Habits. So I certainly did that. In fact, Stephen Covey came to Kazakhstan, and as I've talked about in my live class, or in the English club that I support, the business people in Almaty paid $3,000 a piece to attend his seminar. And so certainly the business people here or in Kazakhstan and Almaty felt that what he was going to teach them was of value and was not just religious indoctrination or whatever some people might think. And so I included that. And anyway, when he came, I invited other professors and students to come if they wanted to come hear him, and only two people accepted that invitation. One professor who later taught Seven Habits, and he ended up being the head of the executive MBA program at KMEP, and he regularly taught the Seven Habits as an important part of his curriculum. And then one of my students, who later became a business consultant herself, came and has thanked me every chance she's gotten ever since then, and said that was one of the most important events she ever attended. And she uses those principles now as she recently, after she got married and had a baby, she wanted to get a regular job she could work into her family life. And I helped her get a job at a university in the HR department. And in part, it's because she showed a desire to improve herself and to pursue ideas outside of the classroom. And she was an amazing student that I could very strongly recommend. Okay, so that's some of the background. Another professor who I started teaching that became a major, whose teaching became a major topic in my class at Xiamen University Malaysia, was Clayton Christensen, who created or made famous, I guess you could say, the notion of disruptive innovation. So I think I recommended two videos for you to watch directly from Clayton Christensen. Christensen received his MBA from Harvard University and founded several companies, successful companies. And his work at least began as, and probably continued as, primarily in the area as a business consultant. He happened to be hired by a journalism association to help newspapers understand how to survive the disruption caused by the internet, the disruption in the journalism industry caused by the internet and by social media and so forth. And so that became an important topic for me to teach in my anything related to media management, because hundreds of newspapers are being put out of business by the disruption caused by the internet. And so this association created kind of a handbook based on the consulting of Dr. Christensen, and how the news media could save themselves. So that was one of the things that was very important for me to teach in my classes at Xiamen University. And while teaching that and analyzing it, I came to believe that in essence, I came to identify where that effort failed, because hundreds of newspapers have failed since then, despite the best efforts of Dr. Christensen to teach them how to succeed and how to overcome the disruption. Um, they basically didn't learn his lessons, and so I've written quite a bit about that and taught that in my courses, is what it was that the media missed, that caused them to continue to fail and to go bankrupt and so forth, despite his best efforts to teach them how to succeed in a disrupted environment. And in fact, I've thought about doing some work, consulting work, and go beyond that, some partnering work, so to speak, with American news media, to not just teach them how to survive in a disruptive environment, but to work with them in surviving and restructuring their business model a little bit to make that possible, to not just survive, but to thrive in this environment. So it's been so Dr. Christensen's teaching have been very important to me in my writing and my research. His teachings have been reflected in book chapters I've written and had published and stuff, and so that was part of what I also taught in my success strategies course at Xiamen University Malaysia. Not directly, I may have mentioned and reviewed it slightly, but it wasn't in that class, since it actually, that course was aimed at only at students who were not journalism students. In other words, they wanted to help students to get as broad an education as possible. So for a journalism professor, they wanted me to teach non-journalism. And essentially I did that. Although part of what I was trying to teach the students, I was trying to help them improve their English understanding. And so much of their homework was listening to videos by such people as Dr. Covey and Dr. Christensen and other famous self-improvement people. Zig Ziglar is the name of one of them. Tony, his name's always slipping my mind. But anyway, there's quite a few. I altogether, I think I had videos from like 100 different sources that I felt would benefit them. And so they were all part of my syllabus for them to learn from. And so while I may have spent almost at least a third of that course teaching principles taught by Covey and Christensen, I also taught principles. I taught principles from other, from 98 or 99 other famous people in that field of self-development. And so the students would listen to the video or watch the videos. They could turn on the closed captions if they felt like needed. They could download from YouTube videos of that nature that YouTube can translate into your native language, or create closed captions for them, whatever, or closed captions for English, or an entire transcription in English. You can download that from YouTube. And so that I had, pointed that out to students and showed them how to do that, so they could learn the content with the help of closed caption or transcriptions if they needed that help. And they would be required to do a quiz each week covering the material they were supposed to learn from, and they were to then write um, a write something in their self-reflection journal. Some of the students wrote as many as 20,000 words in their self-reflection journal. Um, Probably the average was maybe a little less than 10,000. They were only required to do 300 words a week, I think, with what I had in the syllabus. But then 300 words over 15 weeks would that be 450 words, I think? 300 words, 15, yeah. So, they didn't need to write more than, they might have wanted to try to hit somewhere around 1,000 maybe, or, 500 to 1,000 words. But some of them got into it enough they wanted to write more, and a lot of them went over 10,000 words, and some over 20,000. And so then they would turn in their self-reflective journal. I sometimes change the syllabus a little bit from year to year or semester to semester, and sometimes they were to submit their 300 plus words every week for me to take a look at it. And sometimes the only thing I required was the final self-reflective journal. Just depending on how that seemed to work out best for the students and for me, and reviewing all that material for them and giving them feedback on it. Anyway, so that's kind of the background of this core of what I'm trying to do right now, is to give you interesting content that I think could be valuable to you, but at the same time, help you improve your English understanding by watching videos every week, and your English writing by writing in a self-reflective journal and submitting that to me for review. And I will probably put a grade on it, and like you were in a class, a regular course from me, so you kind of see how you're doing compared to other people. So, if I think you're doing pretty well, you'll get A's on each week as you submit to me your self-reflective journal. So it was created to be, in essence, an advanced English course that also had content that would be of interest to people who are trying to improve themselves and to become leaders in society, whether in the Chinese society or in the international society, or wherever they might be. So I think almost all of the Chinese students took that course, and it based on the enrollment that we had each year, I would say it was probably the most successful general education course that was created at Xiamen University. And some years we had, I think at least one year we had more than 300 students take the course. They didn't want it too big because we wanted to have discussion, and of course I had a lot of work responding, to grading all this writing and so forth. And sometimes we had students do presentations in class. And again, I like to play with my curriculum a little bit and see how I can improve it every semester if I can. Although universities are starting to resist changing syllabuses that much. They want it to always be the same without permission to change it, which I think is stupid personally, but because when I was at KeyMap, when I was at Xiamen, and before that, when I was at SUNY College at Buffalo, and at Columbia Basin College at Washington State, I was always changing my curriculum in ways that I thought would be beneficial to students. And I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But a lot of universities are fighting that. They want to approve every word that's in the syllabus, and they don't want to change without their permission. And so our ideas like that. Okay, so I've been rattling on a little bit. Let me give you some background to this, to what I'm proposing to do here. And you're welcome again right now, while I'm in America, and I may not be able to give it as much attention as I would like. I'm not asking anybody to pay anything for the course. It's just part of our English club content as far as I'm concerned. When I get back, I may start offering the course online for pay, but I won't be trying to leverage people in English club to do it. If they choose to do it, that's up to them. But I don't care what you do it. It's actually quite a bit of work to offer this course and grade the content and so forth as a regular course. But there's an online school, I guess you could call it, that has been kind of badgering me to start offering the course online. So, and they would help promote it internationally, and so I'd make a little extra money from that. So, which as a retiree, I can always use a little extra money, like beyond my pension. So I will go through that organization, and so I may occasionally mention it in English Club, or just so people know that it's available, and maybe provide you a link where you could look at a course description and maybe the first lesson, kind of what I'm doing right now, introductory lesson, and decide whether or not it's something that you might want to take. I think it was of considerable value to the Chinese students. They just needed a lot more practice in English, in hearing English, in speaking English, and writing in English, building their vocabulary, so forth. So I thought it turned out to be an excellent course for Xiamen University Malaysia. And in fact, I've thought about maybe contacting them again and offering to teach it for them. After or during the pandemic, I helped them to develop a distance learning program. When it became obvious that pandemic was breaking out globally in January and February 2020, I happened to be on vacation in Kazakhstan, and our students and professors were on vacation wherever they wanted to go. And many of the Chinese students had gone back to mainland China to celebrate the Chinese New Year, and they got caught there. They couldn't come back to Malaysia. Malaysia wouldn't let them come back. And so, because China was the epicenter, so to speak, of the pandemic. So I got a call while I was in Almaty from some officials from Xiamen Universities, basically asking me how I was already doing blended education. In other words, in my courses, all of my lectures went online, quizzes were online, additional instruction was online. And so I was already blending in-class and online content from my courses. And that had become, people around the university had become aware of that and were intrigued by what I was doing. And so when they realized that they needed to have a distance learning program immediately and before they could start a new semester, I was apparently one of their first phone calls. How do you do what you're doing, sort of thing. So I shared what software I was using and explained my strategies behind it and so forth. And so we had in 3 weeks, classes were supposed to start in 2 weeks, but they postponed one additional week. So we had 3 weeks to put together the distance learning program and train professors and how to use the technology and so forth. So I was involved in that. When I was at Kiyosaki University, I was the founder of the distance learning program, the initial one, and the writer of the distance learning plan that was adopted by the president's cabinet, as they called it, basically the deans. But they did not really, frankly, I don't think they fully even read my proposal, although they approved it unanimously. And so the distance learning program at KeyMap was not as fully functional when the pandemic hit as it should have been and would have been if they had actually done what I had proposed and which they had approved in my plan. But anyway, so I had experience as the distance learning coordinator at KeyMap before I went to Xiamen University Malaysia, and that helped in establishing their distance learning plan very quickly when the pandemic hit. Okay, so I'm kind of meandering right now, giving you some background and what my intentions are. So what I'm trying to provide you is an opportunity to listen to some recommended videos that I think are worthy of discussion and implementation in your lives, frankly. And I gave you a list, I think, of 5 or 6 videos that I wanted you to watch and become prepared to discuss in class here and today and on Wednesday of this week. And I would still, I will post this video on YouTube and embed it back into our WhatsApp group. And again, invite people to participate. I don't, since I'm not asking you to pay me anything, I don't really care if you do. I've got plenty to do here in America and visiting family, and we have some property here we're trying to fix up to sell and to get that capital to invest in other ways elsewhere in Kazakhstan or wherever. And so we're busy here, and but I will continue to have classes on Mondays and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. your time in Almaty, which is conveniently at 7 a.m. here in America, or in this part of America where I'm traveling, so that I can get up maybe just a little bit earlier than I might otherwise do, and offer my class and then do whatever else I want to do for the day, visit family or work on our ranchito, as I call it, here in Nevada. So I would, if I had any students here to do it with, I was going to watch one of the videos, one of the shortest videos I recommended here with you, and record it into our course here. That seems, since nobody's here, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But the one I was going to show you, let me just go to share screen and explain why I wanted you to watch this one first and to initiate our discussion. So let me go to it. So this is also one of the other self-development gurus that I used in my course in Malaysia. Guy Kawasaki worked with Apple twice. Towards the beginning, in fact, he was essential in some of the early development of their products, and which is also interesting to me because some of the things he talks about, I was personally involved with in my career. For example, he mentions that probably Apple would have died if it wasn't for the development and promotion of desktop publishing. As a professional, I was using desktop publishing to prepare my own newspaper content. And then I'd create it on desktop publishing, and that would make it all in an electronic format. And then you can export it in PDF format and send it to a publisher, and they can print it from the PDFs you create from the desktop publishing. Adobe created, I think, the first desktop publishing, and I used that as a professor at Columbia Basin College in running their journalism program, and we had created an award-winning student newspaper there. And so I taught desktop publishing to my journalism students, and then other people gained interest in it. And so then I started teaching desktop publishing to other people, like graphic artists and so forth, who recognize the importance of this software, desktop publishing software. And I used it professionally as a corporate ad manager, or a marketing manager, and it made me very successful in that role. So even though I learned it to produce newspapers, it's extremely helpful in the marketing industry. And so I used it in the marketing industry as well, and had achieved a lot of success with it. So Guy Kawasaki said that actually, when you develop one of his recommendations, I think he mentions here in this video, Art of the Startup 2.0, he mentions that sometimes when you create a product like Apple computers, you don't know how they're going to be used. And so along with their computers, they were creating some software, like database software and software like Excel, and so forth, the basic software that most people expect to use and do use in computers. And none of that really clicked. It wasn't that special and that competitive against Microsoft, for example. Microsoft by then was developing its complete Office set of software, and so there was nothing in the Apple version of those sorts of softwares that gave them any advantage over the computers that the non-Apple computers. But desktop publishing really took off in the journalism industry and in the marketing industry and so forth. And he said basically desktop publishing saved their company. In my professional life at that time, I was an editor at a daily newspaper. So we had to put out a daily product every day, and I was the last editor out the door, check over, make sure all the production was done properly and there weren't any glaring errors in headlines and stuff like that. And at the time that I joined that daily newspaper, they were using hardware by a company that Clayton Christensen talks about in his video, a company in Boston that had created what they called a mini computer, and they had different versions of their mini computer depending on the industry. But we had some of their computers for our industry in journalism, and it was about the specialized mini computer they did for our industry was about the same size as a lectern that Professor Wright used at the front of his class. But in order to accomplish what they need, what a newspaper editor needs, it had two screens. The computer had two screens, had a joystick, as well as a keyboard. It's fairly complicated to use, but I like technology, so I became very good at it. But then, so all the editors had to learn this new technology. And about a year later, I was contacted by the local college that they wanted me to come run their journalism program. They weren't offering to pay me enough to quit my job at the newspaper, which came with a good pay and benefits, retirement benefits, health benefits, and so forth. But it was something I had already taught at the 4 years at the SUNY. SUNY stands for State University of New York. Like California, New York, the state of New York has a whole bunch of universities that are part of their system. And with one, what they call him, he's not president, but he's rector or something over all the universities, oversees all of them. And there are, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30 universities as part of this SUNY system, State University of New York. So my first job, at least full-time position as a professor, was at SUNY College of Buffalo. And anyway, so I was successful there, but then really had a chance to develop my own curriculum at the Columbia Basin College in Washington State, and it was very successful. But part of it, when they hired me, was they had already bought Desktop Publishing, a brand that no longer exists, and so I had to learn desktop publishing at the same time that I was using this mini computer developed in Boston for newspapers. And so they kind of meshed together. The mini computer they created for the newspaper industry cost, like, if I recall right, it was about $100,000 for that one mini computer, something like that. And from what Clayton Christensen talks about this company and how they went out of business because they didn't adapt to disruption in the industry, by disruption in that case by the PCs. Anyway, so I was living through that and working professionally in the midst of all this going on, of Apple being developed, Macintosh being developed, Macintosh developing its own desktop publishing software and so forth, and me then teaching desktop publishing at the college and using it. Ultimately, I and some others recommended to the newspaper that they were better off buying big Macintosh computers and running desktop publishing rather than this very focused mini computer. We had 4 of them at the newspaper. 2 of them in the daytime were used by the marketing department, and 2 of them by the newspaper and by the newsroom. And then at nighttime, when the marketing department, when all those people went home, we could also use the 2 that they used in the daytime. But even at that, having 4 mini computers to do the digital creation of the newspaper, we had backlog, so to speak. We were not always able to do our work on time. And so some of us recommended the newspaper just dump those mini computers as much as they cost. Like I said, 100,000 or something. They could only afford the 4, and that wasn't enough to handle the workload that we had. Sometimes we just had to wait for somebody else to get off the computer for us to get on it and create our pages digitally. Anyway, so to me, it's interesting because I see it from my professional experience as one of the early journalists who was involved in this transition from before desktop publishing. At a newspaper, all the stories were printed kind of photographically on paper, on some photographic paper, and then in the back shop they would wax the back of it and they would paste up the whole newspaper. So all the headlines were pasted in place with glue, or not glue, but rather with wax in the back of the headlines, and wax in the back of the stories, and wax in the back of the what we call halftone photos. And so you created in the back shop your newspaper by hand, actually, with using this photographic process. And then there's giant cameras that you would take a photo of this entire page and turn that into a negative, and that negative would be used in creating a metal aluminum plate that would be run on the printers, giant printers that would print out the newspaper. And so that was all part of my career development and experience. So it was interesting to be part of that. And so the newspaper I was working at was one of the first newspapers that was totally produced digitally before it was printed. And then we'd send the digital product to the back shop, and they didn't have to do any paste up. It was all done, and they could create their plates, their printer plates, digitally after we were done producing the pages digitally. So now that's the norm, and the most common way of producing pages, and now digitally, is desktop publishing, which saved Apple, according to Guy Kawasaki. So anyway, he worked with Apple twice, once at the very beginning to get it launched, and once in the mid 1990s to save it from, at that point, it appeared that it was going to die because it still had not found its full position in the industry, so to speak. And so they brought back the founder, they brought back Guy Kawasaki and others who were part of the startup to figure out how to save the company. And the key to that became the iPhone. And so then it actually became bigger than ever, recognizing that the future was in the iPhone, not to say that it wasn't, that's not still important with newspaper industry and so forth, because it is. And as I said, the newspaper company that I was working for chose to go with Macintosh computers, big screen Macintosh computers, and use their preferred desktop publishing software. A couple of years after they decided to dump the very expensive mini computers that they had bought from that Boston company. And in his presentation, and the presentation by Clayton Christensen, he gives the name of that company and talks about how surprising it was to them that that company, which was in the mid 1970s considered the smartest company in the world, then went bankrupt basically in the early 1990s because they did not adjust to the disruption caused by PCs, by personal computers. That they gradually became more and more capable of doing any of this stuff, including desktop publishing. And so at that job at Columbia Basin College, we used PCs to produce our student newspaper and was awarded a prize as the best student newspaper in the northwest part of the United States in that process. Okay. So I'm not going to play this video. This is only, it's not a very long video. I'm trying to see how long it is. I think it's like 15 minutes or something. And he talks about a lot about Apple and the lessons he learns. There's another video that I might have you watch later, specifically about the lessons he learned at Apple and the startup of Apple and the success of Apple. And this is kind of the same, frankly, a lot of the same content as the other one. But he's a frequent speaker on TED.com and TEDx presentations and stuff. And so he sometimes changes the name and gives a lot of the same content as he gives those presentations. So it is an interesting video, I think, and refers to, if you want to start any company, things that you should think about. And he again reflects on his experience at Apple and discussing what he thinks anybody should do if they want to start their own company and ideas they should adopt in that process. So whether or not you ever think you want to start your own company, it's still the ideas he shares are interesting, and he's a good speaker. He uses humor throughout the presentation. He's become quite famous as a presenter of content, like at TED.com and so forth. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop this video, put it up on YouTube, and embed it back into our WhatsApp group for anybody who wants to understand what we're doing. And then on Wednesday we'll meet again. And if you want to really do this advanced English course with me, I would appreciate you watching at least some, if not all, of the videos that I recommended previously in our WhatsApp group. And this one we will talk about for sure in class. We might watch it together since it is fairly short during class, but I prefer that you come having already watched it and be ready to discuss it. Okay, so class today is now after 8. So we've had an hour-long discussion here. It qualifies a discussion since nobody's here except me. I'm talking to myself, which I do a lot of. And then hopefully some of you will join me on Wednesday. So end of class today. Thanks. And if you have any questions, you can address those to me in our WhatsApp group. Bye.
English club?
Yeah. A lot of them, several, well, the people that came last Wednesday all sent regrets. They had other things they had to do today. So I'm not sure it's going to work out, which is fine. I obviously have other things to do.
Did you put inside Russian people who want to participate in English club? Robert, Russian people.
What about Russian people? I don't understand what you're asking.
Remember, Robert asked you to, from Russia, people want to participate in your English club too.
Robert never gave me that information. I told him to give me the information, I'd contact that person. But he didn't do that. I don't know about a lot of people. One person he mentioned. He just mentioned there's one person interested. So I asked him to give me that person and I'd contact him.
Just one person?
That's what he told me.